I'm going to start off faster than expected, but thank you all first to the first Stock Market Experience Mentor Investment Challenge. We ran a little bit of a pilot last spring. My investment team here at Oppenheimer Funds, there were 6 of us that worked with um, teams of kids anywhere from age 11 up through age 18. So, that was our first attempt of bringing some of the volunteer and professional knowledge to the classroom, and figuring out how we're going to create this new program that was really inspired by my experience when I was in 6th grade in Laramie, Wyoming. So just very briefly, by way of introduction, my name is Laton Spahr. I'm a portfolio manager at Oppenheimer Funds here in Denver, and a board member at the Colorado Council of Economic Education. And I got into the investment business because of this stock market experience. It used to be run by the Denver Post, and I played it when I was in 6th grade. Loved the game. Really became very intrigued by the stock market and the whole process of thinking about investing, tracking investing, putting portfolios together. So went to school in Wisconsin, spent 15 years in Minneapolis, and then 4 years ago moved my investment team back to Denver with my wife and 2 kids. So when I got back here, I was looking for opportunities to get involved. And when I stumbled across the Colorado Council for Economic Education, I realized that they were running this stock market experience that had the same roots back to the game that got me in the business. So it was a natural fit for me, and something that I thought could use a boost from volunteers in the classroom to really bring it to life. So that was the inspiration for it. Like I said, we did a pilot program in the spring for 6 weeks. This is our first actual rollout where we've gone out and asked for help from all of you. And my intention today is to really just walk through the overview of what we're aiming to do as mentors. The specifics of what your engagement with each teacher and each team of kids is going to be like is light on details. What we're not doing initially is laying out a whole curriculum that you're in charge of. You're mainly the inspiration, the storyteller, and then a little bit of a guide for teachers as they try to bring the investment discipline to life. And through this session, by the end of September, you all should have your assignments of which teachers and which classes you'll be working with. As a sidelight there, if you do have a teacher, or you have a child or a nephew or a niece or a grandchild or somebody that you would like to work with, we do have some openings for teachers. So if you have a school that's nearby, or you have a teacher that you want to work with as a mentor, definitely have them reach out to me or Lisa Vogt, who is the staff member at CCEE that runs the stock market experience. If you don't have a teacher that you want to work with, or you don't have a school, then we will assign one to you by the end of September, and then the game will begin early October. And that's where I want to move into the next part of the conversation, which first and foremost, what we're aiming to accomplish here is just a real life sense that successful investing is about observing the world around you and seeing what others don't. So that's a little bit of an abstract concept that I think brings investing into a more entertaining discipline than just thinking of it as facts and formulas and following rules. What investing has become for me, and I think what's inspiring to these young people, is that anything you observe in the world that you think needs to change, will change, is changing, can lead you down a path towards an investment insight. So emphasize that at every chance you can, that successful investing isn't about sophisticated math or any specific fact or figure. It starts with observation and it starts with creativity. And in order to take advantage of those observations and that creativity, you have to understand the language and you have to understand all the depth that is part of what we're starting to teach these kids about. So that language oftentimes is what's most intimidating, especially if you're dealing with, fifth or sixth graders, where something like a price to earnings ratio even sounds like an abstract concept. So one of the elements that I think mentors can bring to the table as they work with the individual teachers is working through your ability to define some of these investment terms. When we say market cap, what does that mean? And being able to show what the market capitalization of a stock is, that it's all of the stock that exists for that company times the share price. So it's the total market value of the stock. There's a few resources I have later in the presentation that, as you're working with definitions, trying to bring them into real world descriptions is one of the most important things you can do. And just reinforcing that, if you have a half-hour call with your team and you're talking about some concept that you've gone over before, reinforce that, hey, if I use a term, if you see something that you think you kind of know what it means, but you want clarification, ask over and over and over to make sure that all of that language is no longer intimidating. So that's one of the first things we can do, is just interpreters of jargon that we run into in our personal investing and our professional investing, things we take for granted that if you're 11 or 12 years old, don't have a lot of context to them. Once the language is understood and the math that we're dealing with in the stock market experience is fairly simple, right? We're looking at compound returns, we're looking at price to earnings ratios. We may be looking at, a lot of divisions and margins of how a business may be changing. The math, if you're working with anybody over the age of 10, when you're looking at the stock market experience, is going to be pretty simple and straightforward. That language, like I said, is something that we just need to be redundant with and teach those people about. Once we get past those conversations, then we can really focus on the observations, the businesses that the kids interact with, the companies that their parents or friends may work for. All of that is what really is fun, and where your responsibility is really to just bring it to life. Talk about your experiences in the business world, in the investment world. One other thing that's important to emphasize, this is a short-term game, and emphasizing that the principles that we're teaching and that we're participating with in this simulation, because it's a short-term game, it's fine to play to win, but the teams will take risks differently over the short term than they would if they're planning for college or retirement or any other long-term investing goal that they may be planning for. So early on in your interactions, just to really open up the excitement that, hey, be in the simulation to win it. But the way you win a simulation may be different than the way you would win in retirement planning. So early on with your work with these groups, emphasizing that the skills and the language and the math and all that stuff that we're going to be using are very, very important for long-term investing. But there's some things we do in the short term that may be a little bit different than we would think about in the long term. Also, the fact that it's a simulation, it's a great way to demonstrate what risk is. Actually last spring in that pilot program, one of the really fun experiences I had with a group of fifth graders, and they were in Eagle, Colorado, is sitting down with them and showing them what a call option payoff diagram is and what a put option payoff diagram is. And we bought a few call options on Hilton, the hotel operator, before earnings, because we just wanted to see what that leverage in the option market looked like. And the young girl who pitched the idea of Hilton had a very good call. The stock was up 5% on the earnings announcement, and the value of those options doubled in one day. And it was a great teaching experience about, well, what would have happened if they would have missed the quarter and the stock would have gone down. And we showed the payoff diagram of how much money would have been lost on a percentage basis. I'm not saying everybody should teach options, but if you're with a group of kids that seems to be crawling up that curve and you want to go down that path, thinking about risk and return through those type of vehicles is definitely something that you have the authority to do. So keep in mind it's a simulation, play to win, but early on in the process, make sure that you're talking about the difference between long-term and short-term investing, and the difference between speculation, which is what these kids will be thinking about in many cases, versus long-term compound returns. So don't be afraid that it's a simulation. Don't be afraid of short-term risk. I think if we try to pretend that it's a long-term, we actually reinforce the wrong message, which is you have to think about risk differently with different types of money, different time frames. The tools that these kids are going to learn are applicable, but they really have to think about risk and reward. I mean, I think risk is a very abstract concept for many people, and if we can start talking about risk as the potential to lose money and not be able to make it back, I think in the short term, you can see that risk very acutely, right? Because if you only have 6 weeks to play an investment game, if you have a stock that's down 20 or 30%, it's very hard to earn that back over that short time frame. And that is what highlights the riskiness of short-term investing. So make sure when we're talking about the opportunity and the excitement that comes from every one of these stock ideas that these kids work on, that the risk conversation is part of it, and just getting that in their mindset that every investment they make, they need to think of both sides of the coin. So I'm just going to run through a few tips for success that I had. Like I said, one pilot program in the spring. So from all of you, we're going to have a library of new tips for success as we go forward, and this program starts to mature and the training becomes more formal and all those things that happen as a program matures. But in many ways, you're the pioneers. So the tips for success are fairly loose, and we're looking to build them out. One of the first things I learned in the spring is that teachers obviously are very busy and they want to participate. They're signing up for this. They want to hear from you. If you reach out and you don't hear from your teacher sponsor right away, what we heard from all the teachers is keep reaching out early and often. Make sure that the teachers you're working with are aware of your availability and your commitment and all of the energy that you're bringing to the table. One of the first questions to ask the teacher that you're working with is, what experience does this group have? We had a very wide spectrum last spring where there were some kids who had never even really thought about a stock or a bond. And there were some kids who had played the stock market experience simulation, a dozen times. So knowing what that experience base is a critical first question, so you know what your first interaction or two are going to be like. Understanding what the meeting schedule is. Some classes, like the team I worked with, actually would come in before school, and we would do a conference call at 7 o'clock in the morning. Other teams meet over lunch. Some of them meet formally during a class. So finding those schedules where your time overlaps, that's obviously one of the first things that you need to figure out. And then how much time is available during that scheduling. From that framework, then you can start prioritizing, okay, if I have a half hour, maybe there's one or two topics, one or two stock ideas that we want to focus in on during that time. But reach out to your teacher, know the background of the students you're working with, figure out that schedule, and then really stick to it. So that's very, very important. As far as frequency, I tried to talk to my team at least twice a week. It was about a half an hour early in the morning. That worked for us. Other mentors would go in for like one long class. They went in for like an hour and a half and covered a lot, and then didn't go back for a week or 2 weeks. And most of the communication was just emailing back and forth. One of the points with emailing is make sure you work with your teachers on what the compliance is. In many cases, the teachers want to be the conduit for any communication. They don't want students and mentors emailing back and forth directly. And that, I think, is the safest way to do it. Is you would email the teacher with any specific feedback or assignments or insights or materials for the team, and then that team may send emails to the teacher that then would then be forwarded on to you. It just keeps that accountability at the teacher level. That's really, really important. So if you're interacting with the kids, I would say once or twice a week on the phone, video conference, or in the classroom is really, really good. Trying to meet the team once face to face over the term of the simulation, I think is fun for both sides. One thing I did last spring, at the end of the game, I actually took donuts in for all the 5th grade students up in Eagle, and met with them for an hour, and then met with my team of 5 students separately for like 15 minutes just to have a little bit of a post-mortem of what we learned. And that morning, that interaction with those 5th graders was really, really cool. And for me, brought that tangible excitement that we're trying to create around these stock market simulations. One important thing, a takeaway: don't sweat the small stuff. What we provide as mentors is first and foremost enthusiasm and credibility. So when you walk in, regardless of what your role is professionally, the fact that you're an outsider who has asked to be part of this program, as soon as you start talking about investing, these students are going to really listen to what you have to say. So go in confident, go in enthusiastic. In many cases, students think of stock market investing or bond market investing as rocket science. And I think immediately, if you can, give them a couple stories about real companies, whether it's Nike or McDonald's or Microsoft or Tesla, brands, names, businesses that they see every day, you will be on your way to a great mentorship. So, believe in your own credibility, go in with enthusiasm, and where you direct your team. In our experience, we had 6 different teams, all different ages, and every one of the mentors felt like, hey, immediately we had the ability to lead these kids. So embrace that and do your best with it. One last comment that I wanted to do on this overview, this training session, was just to give you a little bit of a framework of how to position investing. So at the Colorado Council, we're aiming to build economic literacy, K through 12. And one of the core frameworks that we talk a lot about is this earning, saving, giving, and investing, and putting those in context of how financial skills really develop. So this ability to earn is really the foundation of anything that these kids are going to be able to accomplish in their financial lives once they're done with school. So that education, building skills, doing work, making sure that they understand, hey, this is the raw material that allows investing to be meaningful. Understanding the difference between spending for our needs and our wants, and spending is a critical part of what we do with our financial means, but making sure that there is a discipline around prioritizing. And one of those priorities is saving for the unknown, saving for relatively short-term liquid expenses, whether you're putting a down payment on a car or paying a damage deposit on an apartment, or paying for your cell phone. your $1,000 cell phone, for example. That savings helps plug those gaps. If you have health problems and you can't work for a little while, savings is there for that. And then having a sense that giving is also a way to think about compound returns, because when you invest in your community, just like you all are in these mentorships, that has a compound return back in oftentimes non-monetary ways. So if you think about all of that, then that gets us to this investing discipline. So if you have the skills and you proceed with your education and you can earn and you can save and you can give, that's what gives us the right to be investors. And investing, allows our money to work for us. We spend a lot of time talking about compound interest and what that does over time and the magic of starting early. It's always fun to work with these, young kids, and as they graduate from high school, if they can just save and invest a little bit, how much that's worth for them when they're in their 50s and 60s and really thinking about retirement and spending some of those investment proceeds or giving them away, as the case may be. In the game, you will have an opportunity to invest in really any asset class. So whatever your expertise is or whatever your passion is, definitely follow it. If you're in the bond market, if you're in real estate, if you're in ETFs or mutual funds, focus on those with the kids. Stocks are always the most approachable because they're businesses that we can understand. So in most cases, that's the best way to start. But if you have a passion for another asset class, the platform does allow us to invest in, just about anything that's exchange traded. One great way to start, and I have some resources in this presentation, and I'm a resource. If you have any questions, just email me or call me, is starting with a conversation of what is a stock. And this stock track definition and going through that, I think, is a very good way to start. You can do the same thing with any asset class that you want to talk about. What is a bond? What is a REIT if you want to talk about real estate? What is an option, even if you want to get into derivatives? And then talking about the value of those assets. And stocks, generically are priced by the market, and then what's happening at the company specific level. So being able to talk to these students about the big picture, what's happening in the economy, what's happening in an industry, what's happening geopolitically, that affects prices on one regard. And then the other thing that really affects prices is the profitability and growth of the businesses. Now, once we have those, this is where it gets fun with these kids, is you have to talk about the importance of expectations and change. So as expectations get elevated, you may have a stock like Netflix that looks like it has all the growth in the world, but if everybody expects that and then they disappoint, the risk in a stock like that may be very, very high. Similarly, if you have an oil company where expectations right now are very, very low, and then something positive happens with oil prices or with a discovery or efficiency, that change to expectations is a very, very important driver of the value of that stock. So not just focusing on the fundamentals, but thinking about how the marketplace values those fundamentals is an important skill, I think, to make sure we highlight, and not necessarily something that a teacher in the classroom will focus on. I think the importance of expectations and change is what mentors and what experience can really allow us to give color to in the classroom. As far as how to do research and guiding the children on where to go with this, it goes back to that very first point, is what are you observing right now? What technology, what product, what service, what change are you seeing societally that looks like there's a business around it? And then, you can just go to Yahoo Finance or countless other free online resources and find businesses that participate in that observed change. These are a few examples of them, many of them which you're already familiar with. And there really isn't a wrong answer. I mean, I think that's the real conclusion here. Once you have a few of those go-to sites for the kids to do a little bit of research on. Then you can bring them into the Stock Market Experience site itself. We may have a little bit of a tutorial as we get to early October on the website. Frankly, if you go to the website, it's very, very well populated with tutorials and resources itself. Where just playing around with it, in my experience, is the best way to learn it. It's generally very intuitive, very well run, and fairly easy to work with the kids on. So I would just suggest playing around with that a little bit here over the next few weeks. I think Lisa can set you up with sample accounts if you want to actually see what it's like to put orders in or to trade different types of assets on the platform. But if necessary, we'll do a quick little teach-in on that before we get started with the kids. So that was my monologue, running through just the inspiration for this program, some of the goals from a framework standpoint, and then largely just the experiences that we've had so far on what is a very, very new program. So we want to learn all from you. With that, if there are any quick questions, I'm happy to take some of those now. Hopefully you all have my email and Lisa's email, so we can answer anything that you don't want to bring up over the webcast. We can answer individually, but that's what I wanted to run through today, and more than anything, introduce myself, introduce the program, help build some excitement. So anything on your minds?
Hi, Laton. This is Zach Miller. Thanks for doing this call, and thanks for leading this program. I was wondering, could you maybe just review some of the key dates over the next few months? You mentioned at the end of September we should be getting notified of our teachers and our teams, but can you maybe just review some of the other important dates over the next few months?
Yeah, so really there's 2 dates. October 2nd is when this session of the program actually starts. We're still in the process of recruiting teachers. My hope would be to have all the assignments out by the 25th of September. And then that gives you a week to set up those initial conversations with the teachers and set up an initial meeting with the students. And then sometime during the week of October 2nd is when you could have those initial conversations. We do have the ability to shift out when the game actually starts. So I talked to Lisa early this week, and we are looking at maybe starting the actual competition on October 9th. So we'd have the assignments on the week of the 25th, initial interactions the week of the 2nd, and then you can start trading as of Monday, October 9th. And then we would have a 6-week program from there. So that would take us to basically November 17th, I think is the Friday at which the game would end. And then 1 or 2 meetings each of those 2 weeks. And let's see, Thanksgiving's the 23rd, so we want to be done before the Thanksgiving week. Is that helpful enough, or are there any other specific, Zach, that I can try to add color to?
No, I think that's really helpful. I just kind of wanted to get an idea of like the start dates and end dates, so that's perfect.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, well, yeah, like I said, if there are any other questions, please call or email me. We are recording this, so as soon as I get it converted, I will send it to Lisa, and then she will be able to send it out to any and all of the mentors that either wanted in their files or didn't get a chance to join us live. But one last thing, this to me is a really cool opportunity to advance economic literacy, financial literacy in the classroom. I really loved the interaction that I was able to create last spring, and it wasn't that hard. So let me know if you have anything that you're nervous about, worried about, any tips. the nature of volunteering with kids is every interaction is somewhat unpredictable. So, when you run into one of those unpredictable points, just, bring it up, let's talk about it, and we'll figure out how to make it as valuable as possible. So with that, I'm going to sign off and, hope to meet all you guys individually as the session goes on. All right. Thank you.